Hi, and welcome to Photoshop tutorial number 8, transformations. Now, if you recall from tutorial 6, part 1 and 2, we talked about selections, and we looked at different selection tools and different approaches to using a combination of tools to select and extract objects from a photograph. I mentioned then clearly one of the most important skills in working on digital photo montage is learning to make quick, efficient, and accurate selections. In tutorial 7, we introduced the concept of a layer mask and the paste into technique so that once we've extracted that element, we can paste it into a new document and integrate it into that document as though it was part of the original. Now, those are great techniques, but this tutorial number 8 really focuses on, as I said, transformations, and it's probably the third key skill in that you need to develop and understand to do effective photo montages. And the reason for that is rarely will we ever find something that we extract out of a photograph and it's the perfect size for our photo montage. When we put it into our base image that we're working off of, it may be too big, too small, it may be the wrong orientation, whatever that might be, we're going to need to do some transformations to make that work. And so I'm going to start back here with the document we used in tutorial 6. And go ahead, if you recall, we talked about when we're making selections, we can actually save them. So in the select menu, I've already saved a selection. So now I'm going to choose load selection. And if there's more than one, you can click on the pop-up list here. In this case, there's only one saved. So I'm going to load that selection in. And you can see it's not perfect. So I'm going to go to my quick mask mode, get my paintbrush real quick, and I'm just going to add Danny's foot in here. I'm not going to worry about too much of the rest of it. So again, this is actually a really good technique to keep in mind when you're making complex selections. Uh, Even if as you're working, not even before you're done with the selection, but as you're working, if it's complex enough, you might want to go ahead and save a selection that's partially done like this one. And then when you go to, if something happens, you make a mistake, the power goes out, the program crashes, whatever it might be, you've still got that original part of the selection. So all I need to do now is come in here and touch up these little bits, and that's all I'll do for now. We'll go back to our regular selection mode. And then if I wanted to add that to my back end, I can go to select, I can go to save selection. And if I choose the existing one, Danny, it'll ask me if I want to, excuse me, add or replace. In this case, I'm just going to say replace. So now if I save this document, those changes will be there. So either you make a selection, load a selection, and now I'm just going to do a Control C for copy, or you could go to the edit menu and choose copy. So now that we have Danny copied, let's go back to our next document, our photo montage base. And this one is the lawn out the alumni house on campus. And I'm going to, let's just start by, first I'm going to pull up my layers panel. And so you can see what's going on here as I start doing these operations, and I'm going to just paste that in. So you can see created a new layer. I'm just going to call that Danny1, just so we can keep track of that. And if I use my move tool, you can see I can move Danny around wherever I need to. Now, placing him in here really has to do with locating and understanding the perspective of the photograph. Now, what I'm going to do is just to pull down a guide. I have my ruler showing, and I happen to know it's somewhere right in there, plus or minus. So I'm going to place Danny, maybe that's right on the end of his nose there, slightly above that. He's above average height, and he's sitting on a bicycle. So we'll put him above for now. So this is great. If I want to position Danny anywhere in this photograph, right along here, you can tell he's going to work. And I think in tutorial 6, we showed how you could do a paste into and actually fit him behind the bench. But if we're going to move him anywhere else, we need to be able to transform him. So that's where the transform functions come in. Again, the key thing you want to do is to just memorize this one shortcut, Control T for tree transform. Now, there's lots of other transform options in this menu, but we can get to all of them through the free transform. So let's just remember that. From now on, I will be telling you when I'm using the Control key shortcut, but that's what I want you to learn to use. So now that we've got the selection active or the transformation active, I can grab any of these handles and I can stretch them out. I can make him even taller and thinner than he is. Now, for the most part, for design simulations, we want to keep things in their proper proportion. Uh, in a future tutorial, I'll talk about a couple more advanced transformations that deal with puppet warp and perspective transformation. But for now, let's assume when we bring elements like plants and cars and people and benches, we want to keep them in their proper proportion. And that means I need to hold the shift key down. If I hold the shift key down and scale Danny, then you can see that I can keep him perfectly in proportion. Now, before I take him anywhere, let's use the move tool and just do a move copy. So again, I'm holding the Alt key down, U with the move tool, and you can see since I didn't have a selection active, it just made a new layer. We can call that Danny 2. And so now I'm going to do some transformations on Danny 2. So I select the layer, Control T, and you can see I have my handles visible. Now I'm going to shrink him down, something like that. And remember, we're going to position him so his nose, if I zoom in a little bit, his nose is right on that horizon line, just like it is on Danny 1. And so that's what I want to keep in mind. I want to make sure I'm lining him up on that horizon line so I can keep moving him back. Now, since I have the free transform tool active, I can right click anywhere inside this area and let's just choose flip horizontal. So if I want him facing back the other direction, then I can use that context menu for all these transformations. So let's grab another copy of Danny and move him back even further. Control T for transform. Step back one. I hit a shortcut there. So Control T for transform. And I'm going to hold the shift key down and make him a little smaller. I'm going to zoom in so we can position him. So again, he's getting toward the back there. And if I wanted to do any of these other, I could also scale. Other than scale, I can rotate. And that's another thing the free transform tools gets you. If I wanted to tilt him a little bit, just so it looks like maybe he's leaning over. So you can make those kinds of, and then I hit the check mark or hit enter to lock that in. So you can make some little adjustments in rotation to normal elements. It might just give him a slightly different orientation than the other ones or lean him into a crowd that he's talking to. But we have to be careful of not distorting real world elements too much because then it becomes really visible to the user. So with the free transform, we have scale and we have rotate. Now, one of the things, let's come back up to Danny 1, do Control T. You'll notice there's a little dot in the center here. And sometimes when you go to move the selection, you might actually click right on that dot because it is kind of in the center. Now, what that is, it's actually a reference point. So if I wanted to rotate Danny around his foot, I could put that there. And now you can see I'm actually, that becomes the pivot point for the rotation. So that's kind of nice in cases where you want to do a little adjustment, but you want to make sure it goes around that point. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes you'll click on that, you'll move, nothing will happen. That's because you're dragging that little target point for the rotation from the center of the selection there. Okay, so we have stretching or resizing at the corners. If we move out, we get the curved arrow, which is our rotation option. And then we can right click to get to rotate 90 degrees, 180, flip horizontal, flip vertical. I'll talk again later in a future tutorial about the warp tool and about, in fact, we'll talk about the distort in this tutorial in just a little bit. And we actually will use that more than the perspective, although that seems like a likely choice. It's really just a one-point perspective and it's not particularly useful for what we do. Okay, and again, these icons at the top, if you like what you just did, you click on the check mark or hit enter or the international symbol for no, and that'll cancel that out. The escape key does exactly the same thing. If you start transforming something and you don't like it, just hit escape, it'll cancel that right out of it. Okay, so now that we have some Dannys, let's collect those into a layer group. So I'll just make a new layer group there. And let's make a new layer above that. We'll just let that sit there for right now. Now, another transformation option that I want to go over in this tutorial is the distort. It's one that's really useful for putting materials on the ground plane or on building facades. So I need to do a couple other steps to make to complete this demonstration. So I'm going to go over to another document, the paving pattern JPEG, and what I need to do is turn this into a pattern. So I'm just going to do a Control A for select all, go to Edit, and define pattern. Now, I'm going to spend a lot more time in another tutorial about how to make custom patterns, how we can use them for rendering and photo montage. But for right now, it's a simple process. You pick a pattern and you turn it into a custom Photoshop pattern. Then what I need to do is, now I can use this to paint with, to fill with, but in order to distort it, I need to put it into a large document that I can use to actually use the paste into technique and then distort it into shape. Now the process of creating this is really, it's a little bit of trial and error until you kind of get the sense of the scale of the space, but basically you create a new empty Photoshop document. And since I'm working, I know basically 11 by 17 size, I'm going to use this in inches and say, I know in perspective I have more foreshortening as I move from the front of the photo to the back. So in that case, my height, I'm going to take, I guess, at 20 inches and this at 10 inches. So I'm creating a document that it gives me more depth that when I lay it down onto the ground plane, and you'll see why this makes sense to have it in this proportion. And then I'm going to go to fill, and I'm going to choose pattern from the pop-up menu where it says use. And when you do that, you also get a list of patterns. Now, I happen to have a lot in mind, but if you have a few, you'll see the pattern you just created at the very end of the list. So you choose that, and now you can see it just filled that entire document up with that pattern. And although you can see the seams slightly, this is what's referred to as a seamless tiling image. And that's something we use in Photoshop, something we use in 3D programs to apply materials onto geometry within the program. So now I'm going to do a select all and a Control C for copy. And let's go back to our photo montage base. And for right now, I'm going to turn the Danny's off. Now, I don't have all the perspective laid out in here, but I can see enough on the lawn there that I can pick an area, say from here to here. Let's go this way. We're going to go across, up along. I'm just kind of following the lawn mowing marks here, where what I know about the convergence. So this isn't going to be perfect, but you'll get the idea. Okay, so let's just say that's the outline of a new paving area that I want to put into this document. So I've got that selected. Now, when you do this, I'm going to use the paste into technique again. So you need to have a visible layer, could be filled, could be empty. If I select this invisible group or the group itself, this command won't work because it needs to generate a new layer, and it won't do that if it's set on a group, especially, or if it's set on a layer that's hidden. So I have a visible layer showing here. I'm going to do edit, paste special, and paste into. Now you can see here that it doesn't look like it's in perspective. Clearly, this is kind of an orthographic drawing. Now, if I do my Control T for pre-transform, you can see that entire document now is extending way down below my original photograph. So what I'm going to do now is right-click and choose Distort. And the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of move this roughly in the position. And the Distort transformation allows me to move every corner of an image independently. Now, you'll notice if I get too distorted, it kind of disappears. So this is why I'm kind of moving this gradually down into place so I can zoom back in on it a little bit. Probably the place I will start is in the back because I want to locate these two corners right on the back corners of my paving area. And this was an orthographic plan drawing of the paving. And now you can see here as I move in, it hits the edge. And what it should be looking like is that this is going to be lining up in perspective. Now, again, I completely freehanded this shape in here. So if this side and this side aren't converging to exactly the same point, it's not going to be perfect. But you definitely can get the idea. And sometimes to do this, you do have to zoom out a bit because, for example, I can come up here, try and get that edge right over here. I can move this up, try and get that edge, but also the convergence across the front. Because it's not only what's happening here, it's what's happening along here. And if I wanted to move that up, you know, I can move that up to get a little closer. And again, it doesn't have to be on this line. It just has to be representing the same convergence. Now, if I zoom in on that a bit, you can see that that's actually looking pretty good. This square paver here looks about the same. This line looks like it's converging at about the same rate as the outside edge of the paving. So that looks pretty good. And again, don't worry if this looks kind of coarse because the preview mode is a little coarse. Once you get it laid out, you click the check mark, then it'll refine it a little bit. So you can see now that paving looks like it kind of fits in there pretty nicely. Now, the other thing you'll notice is, again, reminder, the paste into it just created a layer mask here that we can work with. And again, a nice thing about that is if we change our mind and we decide that we really want to take a piece of this out, for example, we can select our layer mask. We can get our paintbrush, go to our black and say, okay, I really don't want this part showing. So I'm going to come in here, right here. And I'm just going to paint my black mask, my construction paper, back in over top of that. And effectively eliminate that piece of pavement from the layer, even though the whole thing is still there. And if I change my mind, or my boss comes in, or my professor comes in and says, you know, I like that corner back in there, I can do that. The other thing that's nice about this, we can actually use it to modify what it looks like along the edge, because clearly this, although this is, you know, fits in there perspective wise, it kind of looks like it's just laid in on top of it, and the grass wouldn't look like that, right? There would be some grass sticking up above it. So I can come in here with a fine brush and just kind of simulate that. Get a little hanging over the edge here. And again, if you want to use a little pressure sensitivity, you can even adjust this so that, you know, where you have semi-transparent, you get a little bit of filtering of that. So you can work on that in detail out. But again, if we back out and look at that now, this area looks much more believable that the lawn is kind of coming in, that the paving's been there for a while, and you can make that as rough or as tight as you want to. But it really pops the paving up, the lawn up over the paving, and gives us the proper look. If you compare it to this side, it still looks like somebody just dropped this big slab pavement on there like a rug, and it's not going to fit in very well. But that distort method is something I could use to, if I want to cover up these windows and add a different brick facade, I could just cover that up, and by doing a paste into and then distorting the corners to fit the perspective of a particular horizontal or vertical surface, I can completely reflow the material in that area. Okay, so that's the basic core transformation tools: the scale, the rotate, the flip horizontal, flip vertical, and the distort command. Now, as I said, later on, we'll look at a couple other ones in the menu. One is the puppet warp, which has been around for a little while. It gives you a pretty cool way to actually distort something in any direction. And most recently, just in the last couple months, summer of 2014, they've added the perspective warp, which gives us some other options for how to just bend images a little bit to make them fit with the perspective of the drawing. So we'll take a look at those in a future one. But this gives you the real core set that you can use It's really about 98% of everything you need to do with photo montage involves that set of transformations.